your trusted source for information on the energy transition. This is the Insider's Guide to Energy podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Insider's Guide to Energy podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me is co-host Jeff McAulay. Jeff, how you doing today?
Great, Chris. Excited about our favorite topic.
We're back on AI. I think, it was worth bringing in somebody that's playing in this space to kind of help our audience understand the journey of where you go and how to get there. And that's why I'm hoping we can do that. I don't know if we'll achieve that, but that's my goal today. Do you have any expectations yourself?
Gosh, I'm thinking that we talk a lot about the high-flying dreams of what you can do with AI, and maybe we need some more concrete ways to help get started.
Okay, you be the optimist today, I'll be the pessimist today, and we will kick off. With us today is Ray Rasmussen. Ray, welcome. Ray, welcome to the program today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So you heard my expectation, you heard Jeff's expectation. Why don't we start a little bit about who you are? You work for a consulting firm. Just very briefly, what firm do you work for and what do you do?
Well, I'm the managing partner at rGen Consulting. And if I had to kind of characterize this, I'd say we're on the business side of artificial intelligence. We practice primarily with energy and technology companies, and we help them find, meaningful ways to take a variety of tools, including artificial intelligence, and make the most out of those.
All right. Well, we're going to focus on artificial intelligence today. I always think it's fair. I've been doing talks on AI now for several years in the industry to define what we mean by AI. Let's just set the ground rules before we dive into this conversation and get into all the magic.
You want me to define artificial intelligence?
Absolutely, because you're going to give us some examples. So I want to know what you think AI is.
Well, I don't think I've ever been posed that question, so forgive me for formulating an answer. But the artificial intelligence, as we see it, is a way to stop, in some cases, I'll give you examples, instead of searching, getting an answer. So a typical search will give you a range of things to look at and go explore, whereas I think artificial intelligence tends to give you the answer. And the power in artificial intelligence, the one that we hope to talk a little bit about today, is focusing that in such a way your people get the answers they really need at the time they need it. So that's kind of the practical meat and potatoes of this. Beyond that, there's artificial intelligence that does a number of other things. There's machine learning as an example, and there's also the kind of thing that goes into creating, graphics and, videos and so forth. But I think principally today, we're going to talk about it more from an information and a presentation of that information point of view.
Now, if I take that and abstract that out and overlay, let's say, renewable energy, where does the intersection between the two go for, let's say, an energy or utility? From the description of finding, easier questions answered?
Well, I think the real thing, we talk about the shift to renewables, for example, and there's continued consumption, of course, of petroleum products and the growth of energy and the impacts of legislation. All of these things simply amount to increasing demand, whether you're a renewable or whether you're a traditional generation company or if you're a combination of things. All of these things are creating intense pressure on energy companies to find ways to get things done. And if we have time, we can talk a little bit about things that are going on in the legislative and regulatory space. All of these things add up. And so the real opportunity for artificial intelligence is certainly around some operational things. We can talk about grid management, for example. But what I thought would be of greatest interest to this audience is finding the on-ramp, the place that you could get started and take advantage of artificial intelligence immediately in such a way that you build a team within your organization that has the kind of capabilities that you need long-term to take advantage of some of that very exciting future that potentially you talked with others about.
And Ray, it sounds like you're talking about the enterprise and you're talking about functions that are largely what used to be the domain of the intranet, right? All of these proprietary documents within a company that are supposed to be searchable. And I don't know, I would just say from my experience in corporate environment, never quite worked to get the answer that you actually want. So I've heard that called different things, resource augmented generation or RAG, or sort of internal, basically not just searchable, but getting the answers out of internally held documents. two questions come to mind there. One, how do you actually get the internal documents into a system where you can get those answers? And then everybody wants to know about hallucinations and all that stuff. How do you get to a point where you can actually trust the answers that come out of that system?
I think that's an insightful question. We used to joke about that. We used to call those internal systems write once, read never. And what we meant by that was, or warn if you want, what we meant by that is you put all this stuff away and you can never find it. Most of these companies are very dutiful about capturing information. They're pretty good about it. But really revealing the value in that information is something that's eluded them. So we make a joke also between the difference between search and find. We search all the time for the information we need. We rarely find it. Artificial intelligence allows you to kind of change the whole dynamic to even a conversation between you and the information you're searching. So what we have is some examples, and there's a detailed example, if you want, we can get into, that talks a little bit about an on-ramp into beginning using artificial intelligence technologies in a way that builds on the information you already have, the infrastructure you already have, and begins to build momentum within your team. So that's, I think it's an insightful question. It's for years, I think people have searched. We offer artificial intelligence as a way to actually find answers.
And people are also wondering, well, how do I know that my documents are secure? There's been some horror stories out there of people just dropping confidential information into OpenAI's ChatGPT, which has kind of this hilarious disclaimer of like, yeah, your stuff is secure, but we can make mistakes. So what kind of platforms are you working with? How does that trust get established such that the enterprise customer can work with these tools?
We work almost exclusively with the Microsoft folks for that very reason. They're DoD certified and so forth. So they do a lot of things that in their just a regular infrastructure that makes them pretty secure. And they have a lot of things on top of that. But I think you're right about it. What you don't want to do is just wire the thing up to ChatGPT and hope for the best. And even small energy companies that we work with have told us that they've been attacked by bad actors. And so that concern is not one of maybe the future or maybe even the maybes. It's a reality these energy companies are confronting every day. So we take great pains to make sure that we start with stuff that's very secure and environments that are already within the domain of the energy companies we work with. And most often, that starts with SharePoint. SharePoint is a pretty good place that people put a lot of files and information, and now we can talk about using artificial intelligence to give them better access to that.
Okay, great. So SharePoint, the other thing that a lot of people have heard about and are probably groaning, and maybe this is like, oh, great, I'm being sold SharePoint again, but this time it's different. So what's really different here, Ray? And maybe it is significant because Microsoft has come out with some pretty big announcements just in the last couple of weeks. I'm sure a lot of those AI technology companies that were launching features are just going to get rolled over by the normal Microsoft release. So should we be optimistic? Is this the time to revisit SharePoint? And no, trust me, it's a lot better this time.
Well, I don't think it's ever been. It's got an interface that only a mother can love. So I think there's something there to be said for SharePoint. But in terms of security, which is where we started this conversation, I think it's a good place to be. Secondly, we can put the things on top of it that really offer you the kind of insight and access that you want and do it in such a way that people can really... the problem is not getting information in. The problem is getting the right information out. So that's where I focus a little bit of the time and attention. So, and then there are some things, I get it that, SharePoint in its native form is pretty unattractive, but that is something that is correctable. But I think the central point, the one that I would emphasize, is the one you made there at the end. Microsoft has thousands of engineers focused on this. It's not just the Copilot Wave 2 that you mentioned that was announced about 2 weeks ago. That's not the only thing. They have thousands of engineers dedicated to this. They work 24 hours a day around the clock with engineering teams in the United States and elsewhere working to refine Copilot. As you know, I worked and provided business application strategy to Microsoft in one of my checkered past careers. and have some insight in just the volume of work effort. And I think it's a good pony to bet on. So the way to look at this is not who is ahead by a nose. I don't think that's an interesting question. I think there are two better questions. The question might be, who's going to be on this race next year, and where are the ponies going to be placed 2 years, 5 years from now?
So you talked about SharePoint. You've talked about some kind of common tools in the infrastructure. How are we overlaying that into an AI solution that's bringing value to the business today, right? We want to get the data out. That's what you're talking about. You're saying, hey, look, there's some data in here. I want to get some historic data or be able to understand, ask questions on the data. So maybe just paint the picture of what this looks like when it's all put together.
That's really, and I'm happy to share this with your subscribers, is we have a schematic that we've offered that tells people, here's how, in this one case, the real example I sent to you is the FERC document management component schematic. And what it does is it builds on things that you're likely to have already in your infrastructure. Certainly SharePoint is among them, but the other ones are, Power Automate and Power Apps on top of all of that, and some Power BI as well, to get you to the point where you can put stuff in. The example I would cite is one of our clients had a huge backlog of maintenance records that are in generation. They have these units were installed as long ago as the 1930s. There's been a huge amount of maintenance done on them. And so just getting that stuff, handwritten notes, OCR'd and so forth, was a big task. But now providing access is where artificial intelligence really comes in. Someone who's going to do maintenance can ask questions about that generation unit and learn information that they could gather very quickly in a conversation with the artificial intelligence that might take them many, many hours just sorting through many documents, even if they had been, completely OCR'd and everything.
Great. So Ray, you're describing the final realization of a once promised future of intranet and OCR. I mean, OCR has been around for decades, and I think
for sure.
If I'm summarizing your pitches, but no, it finally does what we said it would do now, and you can get answers to your questions. You can find, not just search. So I would put that in the category of the vegetable eating of corporate intranet document management. So this is good in that you're providing an on-ramp, but it's not transformational or surprising or revolutionary. You're saying, surprise, you don't need anything fancy. Just sign up with Microsoft, figure out how to write some real AI Power BI on top of it, and that's basically eating your vegetables. What does the organization get for those who might want a little bit more? What's the dessert?
Well, I think that is a good way to put it. The on-ramp is a good way to express that. What many energy companies are looking for is a no regrets approach. Something that allows them to make an investment that starts to build the skills and capabilities in their team in such a way that they can take on something more magnificent. If you look at some work that was done by Siemens and stuff like that, it's unbelievably interesting. And there's other examples that we could talk about. What these people have in common are thousands of engineers that they can apply to the problem. For most energy companies and more utilities, for example, are not going to have the same access, but that does not mean you should outsource it. Our opinion is that you should be building these skills stepwise. And if you do that, it's a little. I made it sound a little easier than it is. So that the thing that we just described includes some stuff and a tool called Syntex as an example, and we had to augment that with Azure AI tools as well in order to get something that's really workable. So it's still a little bit of turning the crank to get it to all work, but it is possible, and it's possible within usually the skill set of the team that you field already, without outsourcing this whole thing to somebody else or taking on something so ambitious that it's not realistic. But to answer your question, the future of this is, I'm just looking, is varied. For example, the one that people might want to look at is using large language models to assist with compliance and to review federal permitting. I mean, honestly, that's just heartache and grief. And if you could get something to help you, to point you in the direction, to help you with the stepwise kind of understanding of both what you must do and to assemble the information required, it can mean a dramatic reduction in the amount of work effort around something like that. Were you looking for more examples, Jeff?
If we think about around the corner, everybody's talking about agents. So LLM is where we are in the last 2 years. We're getting the information that's in there that's needed. I hear about custom trained models, so building LLMs based on internal documents, but also not just getting the answer, but having an agent that does the searching. Where are we on the agentic AI journey, in your opinion?
Well, I think that you were making a little bit of a joke about, we've had OCR for a while. You're just telling me it works now. And this is RPA. This is robotic process automation. And that's what agentic is. And so if you look up, that there's been nice folks in that business for a long time, Pegasus being an example of that. And they allow you to automate all kinds of things. What the combination of RPA, if you want to call it that, or the agentic and the traditional AI, is it can react to triggers of one sort or another. So a trigger occurs, and now you can make an intelligent action based on that. And so that's what agentic is all about. So I might use, Jeff, your example of OCR. Finally, I can get information I really need. That's also too what we're seeing with agentic. Now, our experience with that stuff has been a little bit, we find three things. It's not high volume, and it breaks a little bit when we're trying to use it, so we're having some problems there. And then the support hasn't been entirely as good as we need across a couple of different vendors. And what's going on there is the things are maturing, of course. That's why they break a little bit. And then the lack of support is just, it just takes time for everybody to come up to speed. So if you choose to use agentic, it can be very exciting. And there's some things that you can do to certainly automate, and based on, artificial intelligence, use that information to, alert folks or send an email or do some other things. But it's a close cousin to what RPA is, which is, going to be working on structured data.
So you talked about unstructured data a bit, right? In the energy business where we have unstructured data. RPA has been around a long time. You and I talked, I don't know, last week or the week before, and I said, hey, I remember watching a few utilities, do RPA, and that was an incremental step for them a while ago, right? That was just kind of workflow kind of process that they could manage. I think the panacea that we're looking for is actionable intelligence that I can pull out of the data that I can't do, right? So you take a data set, Internet of Things. You've got a lot of devices, just too much information for a human to make an intelligent decision. Computers do this really well, and it gives me some advice back. Or you talked about FERC regulations, and I think Jeff was talking about 3 Mile Island coming online and saying, look, in order to do that, there's millions of things you have to read and understand and get together in order to see if you can get this back online. Computers might be better served than humans for that. Are you seeing that? And then what specifically applications are you seeing that in?
Well, IoT is a pretty good example of where you've got a lot of opportunity, because it's fairly structured data. The problem is that IoT devices tend to be all over on the map in terms of what they send back. So, you've got devices manufactured by all kinds of different people and at different.
Yeah, but I'm talking like smart meters or, things that inside the space that we're playing specifically in, right? So they're a little tighter, are they not?
Well, they are. My point was because the data is fairly clean, it is actually a very good place to be looking, because one of the problems that people have are, what they might call a hallucination, but really it's just inaccuracy in the data is principally the problem. The nice thing about the things that you were talking about there, Chris, is those IoT devices are throwing off information that you can pretty much count on. And so it's structured, and it might be structured in different ways. And this is why artificial intelligence is a good place to start, because it very rapidly can understand information coming at it from various places and normalize it, rationalize it, and make some sense out of it for you. So the IoT devices is a particularly good one because of the quality of the data that tends to come from them. Does that make sense?
It does. So the next thing that comes to mind when I talk to energy and utility companies, and they're looking, so many folks just want to find an AI project to get experience. They may not necessarily need it, but they're dying to have, their leadership wants them to do it, or they want this on their resume. And so they're starting with, you talked about OCR, and I would say OCR is dated, but they're talking about digitizing unstructured data, right? And getting information in from that structured. That seems to be where we were today. What are we on the cusp of next? Because I think that's the 1.0 project, right? I think I've seen people for the last year going all in. There's a number of companies trying to do that. There's a lot of folks like yourselves that are helping people do that in-house and bring the skills in to build that. But where does that go? So now I've got my unstructured data in some sort of format. What do I do next?
Well, I think it's fairly good at looking at that. I mean, if I was going to pick one that I think is not actually in the future that people are maybe doing even now, it's building grid models, taking information and looking at capacity and transmission studies and taking all of that information and trying to use that as a way to think a little bit about how to evolve the grid in a manner that,
so you're saying digital twins right now when you're saying grid models, or what do you mean by grid models?
Well, we certainly can use digital twins. We talked earlier about that with the Siemens folks are certainly doing some of that work, and that's very interesting. But I'm really talking about taking and aggregating information from different sources. The thing about models is that they tend to work pretty well without artificial intelligence. Where artificial intelligence really gives you a leg up is when you have multiple sources and they're different. And you've got to do something to rationalize that in a manner that gives you something you can really use. So you might have a grid model, potentially a twin, but you might have other information about capacity forecasts and other things that really make a big difference with respect to where you want to go. What artificial intelligence can do is look over all of that information and begin to offer you insights into what you can predict and what you can see coming into the future, maybe the actions you need to take.
Great. So Ray, bring this home for us. Let's jump in our time machines. 5 years from now, we're following up and we say, gosh, thank God our local utility adopted an AI platform because they just rolled out blank that has really been impactful and visible in our lives. And I'll give you some choices, right? We had power outages due to a storm, and the utility had more intelligent routing and restoration in their disaster relief. Or, hey, I finally had a customer service agent that literally knew all of the different things and didn't send me bouncing around to 5 different departments to find an answer. Or I was able to get my behind the meter solar interconnected in less than 30 days because there wasn't this bunch of hoop jumping to get interconnection. Three examples off the top of my head. You can add another one or pick your favorite.
Well, first of all, I want to touch on one of the things you said. You saw some of this happen already. In Texas, they had a cold snap this last winter, and when they, not this one coming up, the one before, and 52% of the generation was done by renewables during that period because the natural gas plants have problems when they hit those cold snaps. And so one of the things you're seeing is that kind of resilience coming out of changes, some of it due to artificial intelligence, some of it doing to just rewiring the grid a little bit. And that's the same thing with wiring up your house. I think part of the problem is the infrastructure you're trying to hook it up to, not so much artificial intelligence. But let me offer a third one where what we might be doing is optimizing for electric vehicles. And we're trying to do plans that, allow our people to, manage their commutes and manage their long distance travel and manage in a way that's going to really work. And you've certainly seen a lot of that under development. But what if that planning was assisted by artificial intelligence that gave you a forecast on the demand for charging units based on our prediction of electric vehicle sales? So that would be an example that might be just a little bit out there that I think could be valuable. But we're already seeing some of the stuff I think you touched on already.
Great. Well, Ray, this has been fascinating. I think it's really important for us to realize that there are near-term applications for AI with conventional systems. It doesn't have to be a crazy startup. It doesn't have to be a whiz-bang, high-flying promise. that there are real actionable, maybe eat your vegetables kind of applications. But hey, vegetables are important. So thank you for being a guide through the finally realized promise of corporate intranet platforms and an exciting view into what might be next.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. May I characterize what you just said this way? I think it's all about finding an on-ramp that's no regrets, that allows you to build the team internally that you really need in a manner that positions your organization for the kind of future we were talking about. For most of the people, most of the folks we deal with are very interested in that dramatic future, but they want to make sure that they're well prepared for it. And so the case I'm making is that start where you're at, build this muscle internally. If you need a little outside help, there are folks like us and others that can help you with that. But look at a way to get yourself positioned for the future that I think we can see coming.
Well, cool. I appreciate that, Ray. I thank you for giving us your guidance and your experience and helping paint a picture of an on-ramp to get there. If you're not already playing in some of these spaces, I'd assume that your company probably is looking at these opportunities and how to get there. So I think this will probably come helpful. I appreciate your time today, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks again.
Thank you.
For our audience, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. We tried to bring you more information on AI, kind of giving you what's taking place in the industry. If you like this content, don't forget to subscribe. If you've got questions or feedback, leave comments. Go to the YouTube channel and put your comments there, or leave them on our LinkedIn channel. And we look forward to answering your questions in real time. See you again next time on the Insider's Guide to Energy. Bye for now.